Well, hello, people. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world out there. Welcome to the sixth in our series of Theatre Talk Welcomes and our third, but not our last, EVITA chat. So we'd like to welcome you all here for those of you that are listening and watching after we've done the event. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to hand you over to John Rinaldi, who's my other administrator today. We're very lucky and privileged to have with us this afternoon the fabulous Valerie Perrie, the lovely Mistretta, the amazing Anthony Crivello, and last but not least, Andy Cadiff. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to hand you over to John. John, over to you.
Hello. Hi. First of all, just thank you all for being here. Welcome. It's great to see all your faces. I can't stress enough how much people like John and myself and all of our members follow you guys and grew up with you guys. And, we've all seen you do the show, a gazillion times. And so, other people may have their WandaVision and their Marvel and all that, but you guys are really our heroes. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And we just want to hear from you all. Anything you can tell us and everything you can tell us about your experience with EVITA, and also anything else you want to tell us about what you're doing now or how you spent lockdown. But we just want to jump right in. We want to see if anybody is feeling particularly chatty, would like to get the ball rolling. Maybe just tell us how you got started in EVITA. So who can I pick on?
I think Andy should start.
Sal, you just read my mind.
I was going to vote for Andy.
Yeah.
Because Andy was behind the scenes.
Yes, indeed.
And you need to unmute yourself, lovey.
Yeah.
Yeah, only because probably out of all of you, though the least impactful, I was the first to be there, because I was part of the original production, as was Sal, but I was there for the auditions, and I was working for Hal on the 20th Century. I was the stage manager, so I'm the behind the scenes guy, never on stage, and. So most of my stories are those kind of behind the scene. It's 40 years later. I don't know how many years later. It's kind of okay to tell those stories. Last time we had a big call with Larry Fuller, I was like, I had a couple of stories which I didn't get to tell, but then he told them. I thought, God, I did remember it right, and it was as bad as I thought it was. So, or as naughty as I thought it was. So, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you my very first contact with EVITA. Now, you have to understand I was 20, maybe 22, 23 years old. I had just been working for Hal right out of college. And we had gotten very close very quickly. And so I was not only stage managing at night, but I was working in his office during the daytime, assisting his casting director, Joanna Merlin. And he comes in one day and he hands me this white album, record album. Remember those? This big. And he says, it was a Friday. And he said, listen to this over the weekend and tell me what you think. And it said EVITA on it. And it was a concert album. Starring, and the name is slipping my mind, Elaine Paige.
Colm Wilkinson, right?
Covington.
Yeah, right. Okay, you guys know better than I. So I went home and I listened to it, and then I came in Monday morning and just assumed he would have forgotten he had asked me and would never bring it up again, and I was kind of off the hook and I wouldn't have to say anything. But sure enough, he walks in the door, and as Hal does, he looks at me and he goes, "What'd you think?" And I'm like, when I said, honestly, he said, yeah. And I said, well, I think there's some great songs, but it's a little repetitive. And he said, And he looked at me and he kind of had with that twinkly eye in his eye, he goes, because he was about to go to London to direct it. He goes, just watch me. And then of course, the rest is history in terms of what just listening to the album, it was hard for me to visualize what he ultimately visualized. I mean, the brilliance that he brought to it. So lest anybody think that Hal was not probably the most instrumental element to making the show what it was. He was able to hear that music and listen to those songs and really come up with this brilliant concept that totally worked. But I just loved when he said, watch me. He just said, watch me.
Andy,
Yeah.
you had when you told me this story previously, you said to me that when you were looking and reviewing the material, you thought to yourself, this is a bunch of vignettes, right?
Yeah.
And that
I didn't see the thread. I didn't see the thread. Yeah, clearly. And I don't remember exactly the conversation, but what I remember most was sort of not getting it, which is me as a 22-year-old burgeoning director not getting it, and Hal totally getting it, and being able to take those vignettes and doing what he did with it. But I will never forget "Just Watch Me." Those 3 words.
That's great.
Yeah. It's so
And of
interesting.
course, I was there during all the auditions, and we can get into that later. And the bet between Hal and Andrew Lloyd Webber that they bet a case of Dom Perignon that Al said, I bet you a case of Dom Perignon that Patti LuPone will win the Tony Award for this. Because Andrew Lloyd Webber wasn't convinced. So
Really?
yeah, he wasn't convinced. And Hal won his champagne.
It's good. It's good. So
Did we audition? Excuse me. Did we audition in the theater? I can't remember.
Yeah, we auditioned at the Schubert.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah.
Nothing like it.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, it was great. I will remember, those final auditions, the women who were auditioning for EVITA, they came in dressed. I mean, they came in, because they had to sing 2 or 3 songs, and they had the gown, and they had the ratty clothes for when she was, just a commoner. And, those were the days when people came to, remember, those are the days before you would do any kind of audition on a video. Everything was live and in person and on the stage, and it was amazing. Sal, do you remember Tyler Gatchell?
Oh yeah, of course.
One of the producers? Well, just to show you my naivete, he walked in the door, and if you have to know what he looked like to really appreciate this, but he walked in the stage door, and I went up to him because I was running the auditions. I said, "Excuse me, are you here to audition for Magali?" He goes, "No, I'm the producer."
Oh, what was playing at the Schubert at the time? Was it a chorus line that was in the
Yes.
Schubert? Oh, that must
Yes.
have been.
Yeah, so it was an empty stage, so it was easy.
So it was literally stand on the line.
Yeah, you're right. Well, yeah, and believe me, I want to tell you something. When we auditioned the chorus, I had the wonderful job of going up on the line and saying thank you, no thank you, thank you, no thank you.
Oh, I've just gone goose pimply.
That was fun. That was fun. I hope I didn't get any wrong.
Oh
I
wow.
don't know.
Well, Valerie, you should tell them about your experience with Hal in the audition.
Oh, well, it's similar to what Andy said. I actually did bring a change of clothes with me. I started off in a little dance skirt with, my hair hanging straight down. It was down to here, just blah. And once I sang not Argentina, Buenos Aires, he said, "Okay, can you sing a little Don't Cry for Me, Argentina?" And I said, "Excuse me, can I go change?" Which, he had no idea. And Ruthie was right next to him, Ruthie Mitchell. And she said, "Hal, she wants to change." And he said, well, go ahead, honey. And I went off stage to the quick change room at the Schubert Theater in LA, which no longer is there.
Yes.
Right.
And, a beautiful white suit, and put my hair up. I put a little lipstick on, some heels, and a pair of earrings, and I just walked out on the stage. And Joanna Merlin, the casting director, had hurt her back, so they had John David Wilder. Does anybody remember John David?
Oh yeah.
Very well. Very well.
So he was running the auditions, and I said, "Don't announce me. I'm just going to walk out there." And at that point, Hal kept saying, well, who's that? What happened to that Perrie girl? And so John David said, Hal, that is the Perrie girl. So he said, go ahead, honey, whatever. And so I sang that. And then he said, can you sing a little Rainbow High? And I took off the jacket, and I just was, like I was getting undressed for the, eyes, hair, whatever. And boom, it was just, magical. And he came up to the stage afterwards, and he said, can you come tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the morning? And I'm thinking 9:30 to sing all this stuff. But it was really interesting, because that day there must have been about 5 or 6 of us auditioning the day that I did all the changing. And then the next day at 9:30, it was just Lonnie Ackerman and I. So they whittled it down to just the 2 of us. And I found out later they just weren't sure which one to do the evenings and which ones to do the matinee. So we had already had the part, but nobody said anything. And I was thrilled that I was actually the alternate, because Lonnie had so much experience. She had already been on Broadway, and she was such a mentor to me. She helped me to really understand what it was to be in this major production, and she was so giving and so wonderful. So the 2 of us became very fast friends, and we had a relationship like no other 2 Evitas, like Evita and the alternate, because most of them were always arguing.
Certainly not like the 2 original Evitas.
No.
No.
No. Sal knows. Sal was there.
Hi.
We used to hear those stories all the time, Andy. I mean, about Terry and Patty and Lonnie and I'd say, are you kidding? And I think the thing that really bonded us was right in the very beginning of the show. We were sitting next to each other in the movie theater in those chairs. And the very first time that Larry Fuller was giving the counts on how to cross yourself, he'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Lonnie and I just looked at each other, because we were both Jews.
Jewish.
And of course, Lonnie says, excuse me, for the Jews here, can you tell us, is it right? And it was hysterical. We bonded at that point. And then once I was given the Chicago company, we used to call each other like every day. And in fact, when Hal would visit LA, and then he'd come to Chicago and he'd say something to me, try this, try that. Or then he would leave me and go to LA, and Lonnie would call me. She says, what do you do at the end of A New Argentina? Do you do this? Because Hal's asking me to try this. So we go back and forth and, exchange stuff. But she was great. But that was my Hal audition story in terms of what Andy said. I had the whole, kit and caboodle with me. I thought I had absolutely no idea, what it was to audition for this big, huge Broadway show. And I had no credits, really. I mean, this is how I got my equity card, is doing Evita.
Oh my God.
Wow. Right out of the frying pan.
Yeah.
So, Valerie, I was going to ask you 2 questions. I was going to ask, when you were first rehearsing the LA production with Lonnie and with Hal, what was sort of the way that rehearsals were handled? Did you get a certain percentage of time, or did you just watch?
Yeah, that was tricky. That was really, because we did it in the church, the Methodist church here in Hollywood.
Franklin, right?
Yeah,
Franklin Avenue.
And I remember feeling very left out in the very beginning, because the core of the people, you know, Lonnie and Scott and Val and everybody that had to go on that first night was given plenty of rehearsal. And I was kind of in the background. And I remember Larry Fuller would say, okay, we're going to do Buenos Aires. Lonnie, you stand here. And Val, you stand back there. You know, in the background trying to, you know, figure out all these. And it was very, very frustrating. And then one day, Hal said, Lonnie, take the day off. Val, you're doing the rehearsal. And I thought, oh man, I was like so nervous, so scared. You know, I felt like I was not prepared. And I remember going in there and giving it my all. I still felt like I wasn't really ready to do it. And it was like being thrown into the fire, and it was scary as shit. And then afterwards, at one point, Hal came back to see one of the shows, and he said, you know, you're marvelous. He said, it's really great. And it's funny because I never had an EVITA score at the time. And I said, do you think maybe I could get the EVITA score? I was like learning it from you know, albums and learning from ensemble score and just like picking up like tape recording stuff. And he says, you don't have an EVITA score? And I said, no. And he turned to Larry Blank, who was our musical director, and he goes, give her your score. To this, I have the conductor's score to EVITA, all handwritten. I mean, it's amazing. So it was very difficult in the beginning being the alternate at that point. You know, I felt that most of the stuff had to be on your own. And I learned a lot by it though. And yeah, I think I came out okay, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I have
It turned out all right.
I have a quick question for you, Val. Were you guys who were in the LA production, were you kind of aware of this brouhaha that was sort of carrying on, you know, with the publicity of, you know, and what we've heard since, you know, supposedly this so-called rivalry between like the Broadway production and the LA production, and supposedly, you know, Hal going back to them all going, they're killing it out there in LA kind of thing. Were you kind of aware of that going on, or were you just like too much into doing your own thing?
Well, I think that we were a little bit aware of it. Lonnie was our point person. She would talk to the Prince office all the time. She would talk with Howard Haynes in the Prince office, and she would always say, you know, certain things. So I think we were aware of it to an extent, but not to what Larry Fuller was saying last time. He was talking about that. I do remember a story though, when Hal came out to see our show, and he was giving notes, and we were all just sitting there, just staring at him, and we're looking up at he was showing us the murals and stuff, and saying we had to be one of those characters in the murals, and we were all just staring at him. And at one point he turned to, I don't know, Sal, if you remember this, he turned to us and he said, what's the matter with you people? What is the sun rot your brain out here in LA? Absolutely, like we were just mesmerized by Hal Prince, but
oh, fantastic.
That's how he busted us in terms of the New York company in LA. The sun was just, you know, killing our brains.
Gosh, that's awesome. And Val, how long was it? How long had you been doing the show in LA before they decided to send you to Chicago?
6 months. I did 6 months there, and then I was flown to New York to do all of the fittings for EVITA, to have my wigs and wardrobe and shoes and all that stuff, and to do publicity. I did a thing with Patty once where it was for the Associated Press, and I went backstage. I remember knocking on her door, and I said, hi, you know, I'm Val, and I'm going to be doing you know, and she was this very strong presence. And, come in, honey, you know. And I sat there, and the people were late. The Associated Press was late. And there was like this hockey game. She had a television in her dressing room. I was just this little kid, like in a candy store. I'm just looking around, and thinking, oh my God, I'm in Patti LuPone's dressing room. And meanwhile, this hockey game, and she was dating this hockey player. You know, she says, what do you think of him? Isn't he great? Look at that. Wow. And she was meeting him after the show. So she says, if these people don't get here soon, you know, I'm going to just have to. So they knock on the door. She goes, you're late. And it was so funny. So she pours the champagne. She toasts. You know, they wanted a picture of us toasting. You know, the New York toasts the new Chicago EVITA, and so then she kicks the guys out after they take their picture. She kicks them out, and she goes, "Drink up, honey. Whenever you want to leave, you know, you can leave. I got to get out of here, or whatever." And she was amazing. I got to tell you, I love Patti. I love Patti. It's always so wonderful.
Did she have any words of advice for you, or was she too busy, like, trying to get out there?
She did not say anything. She did not say anything to me in regards to the character whatsoever.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was kind of like her thing. You know, I complimented her and said, wow, you know, I mean, that second act, you were just amazing, and this, that, and whatever. And she goes, oh, thanks, doll. Thanks, doll. You know, just so loving. And, you know, over the years, she's been doing shows, you know, with Mandy. She did a concert, and every time she's here and I call and I go to the stage door, whatever, she says, come on back. She's just always very sweet. And in fact, I remember one time she did that one show, I think it was at the Amundsen, and I went backstage. I had my family with me. I had my 2 boys and my husband. And there were all these celebrities that were standing there waiting to get in. And the doorman came over and he says, and you are? And I said, well, Patti doesn't know I'm here. My name's Valerie Perrie. You know, I've done EVITA, and we know each other from those. He goes, hold on. And so he goes in and he comes back out and he goes, Valerie, come on in. All the celebrities are waiting out there. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing. You know, she was, you know, she's just a doll. She's really great. But anyway, so 6 months before I got that chance. And then it was fabulous. And that's where I met Tony.
Excellent. Nice segue. And you guys did a whole brand new rehearsal process, like basically birthing that production, right? Like you started from scratch.
Oh, you mean in Chicago?
Chicago, yeah.
Yes. Well, originally, John Herrera was doing Che. And when John left, Tony took over. So you kind of were like just thrown in there, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it happened. I was actually it happened pretty sort of quickly. And I mean, it was the same, you know, sort of the origin stories of it. I was in Chicago and working on this brand new little musical called Do Black Patent Leather Shoes Really Reflect Up, and was in the original company of that musical. And then was doing some other studying and working there. And this EVITA audition was going to happen with the Point of Origin company in Chicago, and got called in. And initially I got called in from Galdi. And so came in and sang on this night, and then had to sing, they asked us to sing Tom Jones' song Delilah. So I sang that too, you know, to sell it. And it was at the time of the audition, it was John David Wilder and Paul Gemignani and Ruth Mitchell came out and did the initial Chicago auditions, and it, you know, seemed to go very well. And then at the end of it, they sat me down, and John David was conducting and the audition, and he said, okay, you know, just if you wouldn't mind, just wait for 1 minute, and we want to discuss something, and then call you back. And I said, okay. And so went outside, and they said, come on back in. And they said, okay, so we're going to call you back. I said, great. They said, but we're not calling you back as Magaldi. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, so we want you to, are you familiar with the role of Che? And I said, a little bit. He said, well, work on it. We're gonna call you back as a Che. And I said, okay. So went home and started working on it. And John David Wilder called me up on the phone and he said to me, look, he said, I think you can do this role. And he said, but I need you to do a favor for me. And I said, okay. And what's that? And he said, I want you to tone yourself down. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're Italian, you're very Italian and very kind of street, and I want you to like take the edge off of that as much, because I think that Hal's going to respond better. And I said, okay, I'll try. And if I understand what you're asking me to do. So came in and sang, and it was, the audition went really well. And about a day or two later, John David Wilder called me up and said, well, you blew it. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're in the show, but you're going to be the understudy. And I said, okay. And I said, well, what do you mean I blew it? And he said, you didn't do what I asked you to do, to tone it down. I said, I thought I was doing exactly what you were asking me to do. And he goes, no, you're going to you have to learn the hard way. So I was understudy, and but and I'm one of the few who has the wonderful pleasure of being opposite Val and being opposite Lonnie too, and having these wonderful Evitas as well to work opposite. And I have to say, it's some wonderful Perones too along the way, and Rob Altman and David Cryer and a few others. And so what happened was same thing. They said go out and really learn it, and I just really sort of like immersed myself into the work, and thank God I did a lot in the same way like with what happened with Val. On the 13th day that we were in rehearsal in Chicago, we were running through some material, and it was the end of the day, and Paul Gemignani said to John, okay, I want you to why don't you take a break and just relax? It's because we've been doing a lot of singing. And he said, Crivello, you know the role, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, you're going to sing the chorus rehearsal. So that was my first opportunity to like go through all the material. And, that seemed to go well. And over the course, before John left, over the course of that first, these roles, typical the way Andrew writes roles for men and really for women, they're so bloody difficult to sing is the bottom line. And you've really got to be on your toes. And so during that time, in the time during Chicago, I actually got to do a lot of performances. It was about the equivalent of about two months of the first 4 months, and so and it's just that role of Che is just a wonderful role, and I have to say that I'm not particularly, what Andy was talking about before, that original concept album that Andy was handed, and the orchestrations of it were so much more akin to Jesus Christ Superstar and the rock and roll edges of it. One of the other brilliant things of Hal Prince in the reconceptualization and conceptualization of the show was that he had that score, Larry Blanken, et cetera, fully orchestrated. And it is, to me, and having done Phantom too for Hal and for Andrew, to me, EVITA and the orchestrations of the original orchestrations of EVITA are some of the most powerful. I remember first time you hear when that, after the death, and it goes into when the orchestra really kicks in the first time. I'm getting chills saying it. It is that powerful first moment of Phantom that is that bum ba 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 bum. Well, ba da 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 da. When you hear that orchestrated, fully orchestrated, you know, it just it really does, you know, send chills. I think that's also why you know, even the so-called rivalries and all that between companies and you know, what was going, that little back behind the scenes scuttlebutt. It was also because of the fact that the word was out on the show about how wonderful a piece it was, and how at the time groundbreaking. I mean, I'll never forget, in the first time I saw it, at the, you know, end of first act, those torches coming out on stage and those banners dropping, and I mean, you know, and I see Val clutching her heart. I mean, it was there were mind-boggling concepts that Hal, you know, with the creative team and the designers had incorporated into it. And so you very much wanted to be a part of EVITA at the time, and because of the fact that it, as you know, as you know, Weber and Rice wrote, the lyrical content and the rock edges to it, and what you were able to do as a performer, you know, it just, there were so many areas that performers, especially doing those roles, those lead roles, that you could explore. And you know, it was that show then eventually, as Val said, then 6 months in, you know, took over the role, and then wound up doing it on the road for a bit, and then eventually on Broadway, coming in at the same time that Lonnie was coming in from Los Angeles to take over on Broadway, and I came in at the exact same time because they were making that change. And I remind people that the original reviews of specifically from the New York Times were not great reviews for EVITA. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Les Miserables. You know, that the critics didn't like it, and it was just audience word of mouth, and just how people were responding to it, and obviously performers were responding to it, actors and singers were responding to it, saying, "Oh my God, I would love to have an opportunity to do these roles." And you know, and
it won a million Tony Awards.
Say that again, Andy?
It won a million Tony Awards too.
And
so
yeah, that as well.
Yeah,
including, as you said, Patti LuPone. You know,
right? Exactly.
You know, and I mean, and you know, frankly, you know, even the work that Bob Gunton did in that original production was just phenomenal as well. And you know, I was saying before about the changes with the orchestrations, with now even this new conceptualization of the show as well. And he's credited, but the combination of Hal Prince and Larry Fuller creating this show, and Larry's choreography, you know, was just brilliant. It was brilliant conceptually in what he did, and just, you know, and how even the character of Ava flowing in and out of numbers and things like that, and it just, you know, you know, and nothing against the creatives of the new version and all that, but and obviously they've got to come up with new concepts, but that original concept was just mind-blowing.
And I add to that, Tony, that one of the things that I found most disturbing about the newest version is that there was no metaphor anymore. Everything was almost Disney-esque. The sets were beautiful and everything else, but Hal Prince and I'm blanking on who did all the set design. They designed that steel because that
Robin Wagner.
Robin, thank you.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be the steelness of the Perrons, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And that was completely lost in this new version. So
I don't know if you remember what Hal said at the first rehearsal. And I'm going to try to reconstruct this because I tell this story. He said, "There's no set in this show. There's a door, and there's a bed and a door and a microphone. And that's all there is, because she used the bed to get through the door to get to the
To
microphone.
the microphone.
And that's what he said on the first day of rehearsal.
There is a iconic photograph, and Sal Mistretta is in that photograph. And it's the number where they're dressing Ava.
High flying adored.
Not flying high, flying adored. It's eyes head down.
Rainbow High.
Rainbow High. And how about, you talk about the lighting too. Those lights underneath, and that's why I say Sal, because Sal was like, oh my God, yes. He just did the pose. Sal just did the pose that was there. And that group of men around her, or those lights when that screen, the first screen, when it starts to rise and go over the descamisados who are sitting in the theater, and you see those skull shadows that happen. I mean, the particulars of those concepts and the way it was presented, it was, again, it's one image after another image, and all of that, even the way the show started with that footage of Ava, the real footage of Ava Perón. And the slides that were incorporated and things like that. Just it was such a brilliant concept all the way around.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just as an audience goer or audience member, I was 12, I think, when I saw this show the first time at the Schubert in LA. And I mean, I loved theater, but I had never seen anything like EVITA. And it was so dangerous, and it felt unsafe, and like it was coming off the stage, like you're sort of enveloped in what was happening. And it was fantastic, but it also kind of freaked me out. I didn't sleep, the first night that I saw it. I was just like, my brain just could not stop with the images, like you were saying. I just couldn't stop seeing the pictures.
I'll go with that one as well, John. I was the same age when I first saw it at the first UK tour, and it was just, it scared me. I loved it. I didn't quite know what was going on. I didn't understand everything, but I just knew I had to go back and see it again. And I just, it was just breathtaking. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I was used to seeing fluffy shows like Joseph, so it was a real opening into sort of serious musical theatre for me,
And I think that was the thing about it, was it felt realistic, it felt real, it felt political, and it really did feel like there was this element of danger that was really thrilling. Growing up in in Orange County, super bougie middle class in Orange County, and then suddenly you're thrown into the flaming torches and banners and cigars and like all of it. It was a lot. It was a lot to process.
I have to say also, you're talking about the tension, and again, this is I don't mean to be battering the new concept, and I think that it succeeded in many ways, but the change of the dynamic and the character change of Che, from being an antagonist, and yes, viewing, but at the same time presenting a rival point of view that was antagonistic between himself and the Peronists, versus I forget what the name of the film is, that was Che Guevara, that was young Che Guevara, something Diaries, I forget.
Motorcycle Diaries.
Motorcycle Diaries.
Yeah.
Motorcycle Diaries. Using that concept and making Che a bit of an everyman, it took an edge off. And I'm going to point to Sal too. In saying that even the tension that was there with Magaldi as well in that early part of the show, which helps to set up. I mean, that Magaldi, who was the star, and then became a pawn, as Andy had said, as a means of going through a series of doors to get to the microphone. You got to talk about that too, Sal, as well, and Magaldi.
Sorry.
I was going to say, on that same point that Tony was making, I think that this new production is much more presentational, and Hal always wanted it to be confrontational. He wanted to make the audience squirm. He wasn't there to make them, feel good. And he didn't even, I mean, there were plenty of times where, people would say, well, why wasn't there a blackout? He didn't want a blackout. He would have whiteouts, because he didn't want people to applaud yet. He wanted everybody to be very uncomfortable in their seat. I remember when we were rehearsing Sal, the good night and thank you at the very end, when there is no one at all, that whole thing, and it's dissonant sounding, and he always say he wanted us to point to somebody in the audience at the end, you're the same, and he wanted you to pinpoint them so that they were squirming in their chair. That's the way Hal wanted the audience to feel, and at
He wanted all his shows to be that way.
Yes, that's true, Andy.
I mean,
You're
think
right,
about
Andy.
it.
It's so funny you're both mentioning that, because when we had Mark Ryan in the first EVITA chat and the first and second ones, he said originally when David Essex was playing, he played it very much as, he was like a narrator, and he wasn't there to really, he just was there to move things along. And then when they rehearsed the Broadway cast and Hal came back, and just as Mark was taking over the role, he said, I want you to attack her constantly, be that other opinion. I want you to be aggressive because of the dynamics between what in the work that Patty and Mandy did. It was very very much that, rather than David kind of was this everyman kind of character. So but he said, yeah, he wanted that confrontation from the start, and that other opinion, to be, to reflect, almost like holding a mirror up against her and showing, he being the voice that shows the flaws of her, that she's, as the story unfolds, kind of thing. And like you said, as well, confronting the audience as well, it just I mean, it was there from the by the time I saw it, it was all there with the next generation of people. And we've had people like John Barr who said that was the kind of instruction he got from Hal as well when he was rehearsing, and he was like the next generation down. So it's that production, like you said, it was unlike any other. It was it for us over here. It certainly was groundbreaking. So and it's one of
the show. I don't want to say drags you, pulls you through it as a performer and as the audience. It's nonstop, 90 minutes, bang, 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 bang. And the cool thing that we all, as performers especially, I think found is that we could, within the parameters of the concept that he created, do many different things, think many different ways within the thing. I found my way through that show during our scene with Ava, beware of the city. Ava, beware of this, and then beware. So he starts out patting her on the head, then looking her in the eye, and then going, well, she's a bitch, so she's going to work with, like there's a progression within that. And I wound up doing the nightclub scene, the song with an accent, and then dropped it immediately. The audience here sitting on their hands, and it was shocking and different. And I thought, I'm going to try that. That's kind of, but there was so much in it that you can play with. We're talking about the auditions and stuff. I auditioned for it. I was doing On the 20th Century at the time, and that was going on tour, and with Rock Hudson and Judy and all that, and Imogene, so I had a job. Jim Yanni came to me and goes, aren't you going to audition for EVITA? I go, why? And he says, because, it's EVITA. I said, well, so what? I said, what am I going to do? I said, you already cast Mark Sayers. I said, in this role, in the role that I'm right for in this, why should I go in a parallel thing in another chorus? I felt it was time. I was 30 something years old at the time. I looked younger, but I'm 76. I look, whatever. And you wind up, he kept bugging the shit out of me. Audition was every time I saw him. I went, okay. So I thought, what do I do? Well, I didn't do the Tom Jones song. They didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
But I thought, what do I sing that's similar? And I thought of, well, the last part of that hugely long song, Begin the Beguine. And then I sailed it right up to a nice high B flat, and that was it. But when we went to LA, after I did it once in New York, I got it to go on once in New York with Patty. And then he told me I was going to LA, So we go to LA, and I'm sitting there in the church at Highland and Franklin. And I had a friend in the company I'd worked with in '73, Wayne Scherzer. He was in the ensemble. And I made a lot of friends there and loved it. And Ruth Mitchell came up to me and she goes, you're not, you've already gone on, the role, blah, 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 blah. And in the original, I was sort of the prow of the aristocrats, the boat with the long cigarette holder. Bob Gutton used to call me Razor Hips. Anyway, and she said to me, would you mind staging the aristocrats? That was a bitch to do, that number. And because it was 5, 6, 8, 7, and all touching, all turning around, all this and that. And I had a ball doing that. I sort of unsung hero for that number, but I loved doing that. It was so much fun. And when Val came in and we were working with her, she was on fire, from our end of the views, you were just flawless. And they took me out of that, put me in EVITA. I toured with EVITA, and perchance I toured EVITA through Chicago while Val was there with EVITA. And that's how I met Tony. One night in Val's apartment at dinner. And he was so funny. I could play this goddamn role. I'm going to do this fucking role. And I went, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And you did. And you did it great. So the history with that show, and then I went back to it. Howard Haynes brought me back in when Darren Altai did it, I think, on a tour. And it's just great history. But through all of that, the energy and the thrust and the push in that show stimulated you and made you want to do more and just eat it every night, and the audience too. And the very few shows did that. They may have a number or two in that, and they have things where that pull you there. But this show was nonstop for 90 minutes of that. My favorite moment of memory in that show was opening night when Patty did That's What They Call Me, So Lauren Bacall Me, and Bacall was in the fourth row. She looked right at her, just right at her, and gave it to her. And I later worked with Betty, and she was just great. But what a history we all have had with this, And Andy was like there at the concept at the beginning, so that has to be gold for you, because the learning process,
Well,
I consider this good.
Well, I mean, like you, the beginning of my career was on the 20th Century, EVITA, and Sweeney Todd.
Right.
That's how I learned everything that I then used in my career.
Yeah.
And it was people said to me, "Why didn't you go to grad school, drama school?"
You did.
I said I went to the best drama school imaginable.
Right.
I went to the Hal Prince School of Drama
and
School of Musicals.
To watch the different people come into the roles and do things to it and add things to it, or maybe don't understand this, but it was just fascinating to me. Because basically I was groomed as an actor. I just happened to sing well and I could dance. So I worked, But in the meantime, you're always looking for that inner thing and that substance. I say to the kids that I work with now, I said, you can be flashy. I said, you always have to have result first or you're not going to get there. But then you can substantiate it as long as you're in a long enough run, and you start to find all this great stuff in there, these treasures. And My favorite treasure was I wrote "Goodbye, Val" in my my hair when she was leaving.
It was it was my last performance in LA before leaving for Chicago, and I'm sitting at the table with the family, and Sal finishes singing on This Night of a Thousand Stars. He's wiping under his pits and everything else, and he's coming over to the table and he sits down and he just kind of flashes in my, and on his sideburn it says, "Bye, Val." And I was like, I just lost it. It was,
Well, when Lonnie left, when I was leaving to do Sweeney, I
yeah.
had to do something to say goodbye to Lonnie. So I had put myself into the crowd in the balcony scene. I wore one of the old ladies' dresses. I wore my Magaldi boots. I had a sweater over the thing and a wig. And I kept my spangled Magaldi belt on, and I covered it with the thing. So Lonnie spotted it right away. And then when she went, "Have I said too much?" I went, and then I opened the thing up with the spangled thing. Well, we hooted, and it was just great. I have great memories with that show, and the best thing about it, I think, is what I said before, was that we could find our way through that and give whatever we all needed or wanted or found, and it was perfectly acceptable, because there's nothing written except the lyrics.
Right.
I
think it's very good about allowing space to do your own thing.
Oh, yeah.
He might say, "Try something," and then he'd go, "Nah." I remember during the New Argentina, you know how Patti LuPone used to always do like this on her head every time he'd say, "Then again, we may be foolish not to quit while ahead." And she'd do this huge gesture. And he asked me once to try it, and I tried it. And he goes, "You know what? It doesn't work on you. You're tiny." Nah. He said, "Do what you're doing." He said, "I like what you're doing." But, he did give you that room, and it was great. And I think also this show was so special because we were doing something that was not a happy comedy. I mean, there was so much tension. There was, a dark ending, and we had to get our own humor. We had to make our own humor as so we didn't explode. So as performers, we used to do a lot of joking and kidding. I mean, it's how we stayed sane. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, with such weighty subject matter, and I'm sure you do. Otherwise, you would just sort of sink into the morass of it. But God, we'd love to hear more of any of your funny stories like that are great. In fact, I was going to ask you a question, Val. I heard a story somewhere, and I can't remember where, about the staging of the high-flying adored scene in Chicago when Ava's at her dressing table doing all the stuff while Che sings to her, and her back is to the audience. And did I hear that Hal called that backting?
Well, he never said backting, but we refer to it as back acting.
Okay. So by the time the story telephoned its way down to me, it was backting, which is great. But
that were back acting. That was one spot where you were, at the dressing table, and you had to be able to deliver that fatigue. And the other spot was right after, "Oh, what I'd give for 100 years," and then she turns around and she walks upstage. That was the other back acting, because you didn't see her face, but you knew, that was her first, indication that she was ill. So you had to show through walking upstage, your back had to show the collapse almost of what was going to happen when she walked off. Those are the two back acting moments.
Back acting. Well, and that moment is so powerful too. I mean, I can still see it. The thing that amazed me the first time that I saw it was as Ava takes that slow walk up stage, the lights that are next to her dim as she passes by, and it's like her life force waning. It's incredibly moving, and it's just one of those things. it was so effective, but it was so simple at the same time. It takes a genius to come up with a simple idea, right?
Those light panels were spectacular. You know, when you were up in Buenos Aires and you felt the flash of the big city, and then symbolically, those lights started to dim as she walked up. She made that. So again, everything was so symbolic with his staging and with the lighting and all that. It's just a brilliant piece. The original staging and everything is brilliant.
It is. And I was going to say too, I think with EVITA, another interesting parallel is that it reminded me so much of like later when I started going to opera and I didn't necessarily speak enough Italian to follow the action, but the story was so vivid and those symbols like that were so vivid that even if you didn't speak a word of whatever language the show is in, I think you'd get most of it. You would get the emotion of it just by the way it's done. And I can actually vouch for that because I've seen some foreign language productions of it. Over here in the Netherlands, they have a completely different libretto for it. They've actually had 2 different librettos for it. And it still just nails, it still just kills because it's that combination of the music and then whatever libretto they're doing it to, fusing it together to tell that story. And it's just such a powerful piece. Not too many like it. We were lucky to have EVITA and Sweeney Todd. Weren't they like a year apart?
Yeah.
Close together. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was doing Chicago, it was a matinee, and Hal had called me and said, "You want to come with me to see Sweeney?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." I wasn't on. I had my alternate on, and he picked me up in a car, and we went over there to the Erie Crown, is where. And I remember sitting with Hal in the audience, and he was squirming. He wasn't a sit stiller. And it was the scene with Perrie on top where I turned to him and I said, "God, that's so brilliant. How did you come up with the concept of putting it on top like that?" And, and I was going through the whole thing, and he said, "I have no idea." He said, "I have no idea what it was that possessed me to do that." And then throughout the thing, he was squirming till finally he said to me, "Honey, I'll see you at intermission." He said, I'm too nervous, because I think it was either a last dress rehearsal or opening. I can't even remember. But he went out into the lobby area, and I met him afterwards. And he was just too nervous to sit there and watch. He didn't like watching his work, like that. He was listening to the response, and it was just too much for him, anyway, which reminds my opening night gift for Hal for EVITA. I found at the Water Tower place this store that had these wonderful little trinkets, and there was Mazel Tov. I don't know.
Sorry about that.
And there was this kinetic figure. It was called the Walking Man, and it just you turned it on and it just kept walking, and it just reminded me of Hal. And I was at Water Tower Place purchasing this, and all of a sudden over my shoulder I hear this voice that says, "You shouldn't spend your money until you know you're a hit." And it was Hal, but I remember giving him that, and Judy and I and Hal were in the back of this car, and Judy said that gift was, Judy, his wife, that gift was absolutely perfect, because Hal never stops. He just, we were all shocked when he passed, because I thought he would live forever. I just never thought of him ever going,
I mean, such a giant. Did you guys see that they named the chandelier in I think the Tel Aviv sit-down production of Phantom? They always give the chandelier a name, and they named that one Hal in honor of his passing. So I thought that was a really sweet story. I think that was right before COVID. So you might be able to find something about that if you YouTube it. I think it was out there on YouTube. But
I want to ask Andy something, which is, Andy, when all the stuff that Val was talking about, with all of that tension and all of that, what was it like in his office when I mean, you said production after production, What was it like in his office with the characters that were coming? I mean, these Broadway icons going in and out of that office. What was that like?
I don't remember the conflict, honestly, between the city, the productions. And the one thing that Hal wasn't is someone who pettiness was something he just couldn't be bothered with. He just couldn't be bothered with pettiness, and so it wasn't something that came into the office. The office was a comfortable place, but it was a relaxed. It was business. And there wasn't any bullshit in there. I will tell you off EVITA, Sal will appreciate this. One day I was sitting in the office doing some work for Joanna, probably looking at your picture and resume, Val, but Sondheim walks in and just heads right for Hal's office, disappears in his office, closes the door, and then we kind of hear the pounding and the singing in the background, and we hear Hal guffawing. And when it's done, he opens the door and says, "Okay, everybody come in here and listen to the funniest song ever written for the musical theater." And then Steve proceeded to play "Have a Little Priest" for us.
Wow.
It was maybe one of the great moments of my career, to see that. But no, Hal, he just didn't let that kind of pettiness. It wasn't him. It wasn't him.
And very interesting too. He came to LA before he had already told me I was going to do Sweeney. So he brought me we went to LA. We're in LA, we went to some Spanish restaurant. He sat next to me and he was very fidgety. And I thought, I said, what's up? And he says, I have to tell you something. And I'm going, oh Christ, here it comes. Whatever it is, And he says to me, well, we're gonna, you know how the Perrie song is in 3 segments or 4? I don't remember. He said the beginning, and then there's the shaving, then there's the tooth pulling, and then there's the end. He said, we're going to cut the tooth pulling out of it. So it has a beginning, middle, and an end rather than 2 middles. And I went, oh, okay. In the meantime, I had all this physical comedy in my head about that tooth pulling, like W.C. Fields in that segment. Anyway, so we started talking, and I said, well, how does that affect me? I said, I understand what you're doing. I said, does it affect my salary? And he said, no. I said, well, then cut what you like, go ahead. And it worked better that way. But he was nervous to say it to me, which was kind of humbling, and I really felt that was kind of cool. And anyway, so
he was a very imposing figure, a very imposing man who didn't have an ounce of arrogance.
No, I remember the first time I was in his office. I was sitting there, and he was sitting behind the desk with his paraphernalia behind him, and I was talking to him, looking at him like this, and then my eyes started to wander all over the 20 bloody Tony Awards, and when I came back to him, he was just going. I went, okay,
Well, Sal, imagine me as a 21-year-old kid coming to interview in his office, and you walk through the door, the big double doors that say George Abbott and Harold Prince, and you walk in, and the receptionist is sitting there, and behind her is a roulette wheel. I don't know if you remember the roulette wheel, and every slot is a show: West Side Story, Fiddler on the Roof, Pajama Game, Damn Yankees, New Girl in Town, Cabaret. And you're looking at all this and you want to just turn around and walk out the door again. Because you think, God, there's just no way. There's no way I belong in this office.
Wow.
Well, we're glad you didn't turn around.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't turn around, that's for sure.
The interesting thing to me is that he was always willing to listen. Whether he used it or not, or whether he agreed or not, he listened to you. And we had a session in 20th Century. It was in a rehearsal hall, and there was something, I don't know what it was, but it was something that wasn't sitting right, and Ruth and everybody were all standing there and talking, and I raised my hand to say something about it because, and she looked at me like killer daggers, shut up, you know. And then Helmut, no, wait, what is it? I said, well, with all due respect, you're not inside the number, we are, you know, and this is what's happening inside the number. And in that approach, the validity of what I had to say was taken to heart and fixed, you know. And I thought, well, this is how you do it. This is how you shouldn't be afraid. You just say what it, I mean, I was older. I was an older guy in my company at that time. But the point is that the truth is the truth. Let's get it out there. And this is what we're experiencing, and you're only looking at it, you know? So I never forgot that. And I carried that with me through all the shows I did for him. That I had an issue with billing at one point. When I came back into EVITA, the fellow who took over my role didn't negotiate or didn't made them wait, and the poster was printed without Magaldi's name on it. Mm. And I thought, whoa! I said, there's only 5 principals in this thing, and I'm the 4th. And so I called Howard Haynes. Howard, well, you got to negotiate. Now Howard is a friend. I went, Howard, you're talking to me. What the hell's going on here? Well, you got to negotiate that now. Your agent this and that. And he explained to me what happened. And I said, well, I didn't have to do that in the beginning. Why do I have to do it now? So I wrote a letter to Hal. Next printing, my name was on there. You know, I just stated what had happened. I said, why? You know, the human thing, good thing.
What Andy was saying about not an ounce of arrogance, I found that to be the same throughout my experience with Hal. And I found him to be an extremely good communicator. In fact, even when I left the show, we continued to mail each other. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how are you doing? What's happening? What's going on with your career now? And he was I always heard back from him. And the last correspondence I had with him was right after I got home from Buenos Aires. My husband had taken me there. Cliff Lipson says hello, Andy, by the way. Oh, and, yeah. And he used to play softball with Andy. Anyway, but I had contacted him because I remember during rehearsals, Hal would say, when you go up there on the balcony, you have to be so overwhelmed that you can't even get the words out. I mean, you're so emotional. And, you know, even if it won't be easy, you know, like you don't have to do it won't be easy. You have to have that feeling of that hesitancy. And I said, okay. And, you know, like Andy, I was very young when I did that role. And, you know, I tried my best to do it as best I could. And then when I went to Buenos Aires, I had an opportunity to tour the Casa Rosada. I remember going upstairs and the guide said to me, now this is the pathway that takes you out to the balcony where Ava would do all of her oration. So I said, oh my God, I'm going out to the balcony. This is like insane. So as I was walking this pathway and everything alongside me, and then the doors open, like there were like these big, you know, French door windows. And I walked out there and I looked at this huge square and imagining all those people that were there yelling and screaming. I couldn't fucking breathe. I could not breathe. And I remember the first thing I did when I got home is I said, oh my God, Hal, I had an opportunity to do this. And I can't believe it. You were right. It was insane. I just had this. And I went on and I told him this and he wrote me back and he said, oh my God, Valerie, I'm so happy that you got an opportunity to go there. He said, isn't it fascinating? You know, Judy and I went and Daisy met us there and we did. And he was just so Hamish. Just an incredibly humble guy. And that was something that I found so incredibly refreshing that with all those Tonys and with everything that he had done. And man, I mean, my knees were knocking when I was auditioning for him. I was so nervous. And it all went away because he was just the best. He was just the nicest.
Valerie, one of the very first things I directed, for nothing, of course, on 100th Street at the Trinity Theater on 100th Street and Columbus Avenue, in the basement of the Trinity Theater, I directed a production of The Broken Heart by John Ford, or Jacobean revenge tragedy. Okay. And one night in one performance, you know, there was like 20 people in the audience, 25 people in the audience. 4 of them were named Prince. and the entire family came to my 3.5-hour revenge tragedy. And it was, the cast was freaked out. It was unbelievable. But the next day, I see on Joanna Merlin's desk the program for the production. She says, "You should see this. It's really long, but he's good."
Oh my gosh!
Wow. Can you believe he would schlep up to 100th Street to see this, you know, cockamamie production that I put on, and was supportive, and you know, that's what he did.
I got, when I got Sunset Boulevard, what was that, 90, in LA, 93, 92, I can't remember, 93, I think. And I got a note, which is up on the wall behind me, from him and Judy, congratulating me on getting the show. Really.
Yeah.
Very moving, for sure. Anyway, this
right,
production, our production of EVITA, all of our productions of EVITA are historical. So in my life, all I wanted to do was create something, be in something that made history, and work with very famous people. And I did it. And we all did it. So there you go. And those memories can never be relived. They can be visited, but these people are gone. And we're what's left. We're the residuals. and
you know, and to that point, Sal, isn't it amazing how many opportunities that office created for so many people?
Oh yeah.
It's unbelievable. And not only in the United States and across this country, around the globe.
Yeah.
Hey, Tony, fun fact about John David Wilder.
Please.
Next time you see the movie Airplane.
Oh, I know.
Oh, you know that. He's one of the Hare Krishna guys.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Love it. I want to ask too, John and John. Did Larry talk about remounting the original production at all? Because I wasn't here for the back end of the talk.
No.
Did he talk about it at all?
Not a lot, no. I think he mentioned that he was involved with the 20th anniversary production, and they thought it was going to New York. And he mentioned that.
He mentioned the Australian production, didn't he? Which
he talked about that. But you remember he also mentioned that 20th anniversary didn't go to New York because it turned out that Lloyd Webber and Rice didn't want it to go to New York.
They didn't want it to go in because it was something to do with.
They were already talking brandage.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just that. It was, I think it was their contract with Stigwood was, but they didn't want any more money going to Stigwood apparently. So allegedly that was the story. Yeah. So yeah, I think it was their contract with him was about to end. So unfortunately that didn't happen. But he did mention it. Some shows he kind of quickly skimmed over, and others he spent more time on. He was, as we found out, Larry's Larry, and he's really delightful, and it was a pleasure to be able to have him just talk away and just hear what he had to say, and
I'll share a little something then.
Yes, please.
I happened to. In New York, I had, as Val was saying, he was always, and Andy was so gracious, and Sal, he was always so gracious, and the many things about Hal Prince, his graciousness, him always, you write to him, he writes you back a letter. That old school gesture is something that is lost with people today. And you know, the easiness of writing an email, that wasn't Hal Prince. And the in our conversation, he one of many we had, he said to me that he had approached Andrew and said to Andrew, you know, there's one production that I would love to do a revival of, and I would do it exactly the way I did it the first time, and that's EVITA.
Wow.
And Andrew said, that's a wonderful idea. Let me think about it. And that was the wellspring for the new version and revival, and new conceptualization. I mean, that's what I have to put together when I put together 2 and 2. But at the time, I believe that there was a production, an original production, that original staging, that was in South Africa. And so what had happened after the fact was that the production indeed went to London and then came to Broadway and ended. But there remained the notion of Hal and Larry restaging in the original version EVITA, and with the possibility again of it coming into New York. I didn't know that Andrew didn't want to deal with the Stigwood their heirs or whatever. What was the situation as well? But I know that, I mean, at least from Hal's mouth, he had said that was being seriously discussed, and then unfortunately he passed away.
Because there was this also after the 20th anniversary, there was this, I think it was the 2018 production that you're talking about, Anthony, or 17, something like that, with Emma Kingston in South Africa, and then they brought it over to Australia, and Australia said you have to have Australian talent, so they brought Tina Arena in to do it in Australia, and then that production just ended, like it didn't come to New York. So I think I was mixing up my EVITAs that didn't come to New York. That was the third one.
Yeah, I think did the Grandage production, I think, happen in, was it I want to say 2006, was it? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, and then I think the version that was Emma Kingston did in South Africa, wasn't that? I think that was a variation of the UK tour, I want to say. Or I think
it was billed as being the Prince production. It was billed as just being the straight up original production, although not all of the music was the same. They still do have the original Buenos Aires dance orchestrations. Those are just gone forever, which kills me.
Yeah, I was going to say, from what memory serves me correctly, the Australian production used Larry's staging or tried to do as much of it as possible, but it didn't quite fit in with the new arrangements, because a lot of the new arrangements, it was it was a lot brighter, and there was that heavy samba beat going on with it, and what have you, and it didn't quite sort of gel from what I've seen of video clips of it and stuff. But I always mention it. There was a kind of hybrid production that happened at the Solo Playhouse, I think it was called.
In Florida.
Yeah, where they used kind of a hybrid of the old and new arrangements to create their own version of the show, and that was, from the clips out there, that was quite sort of new, and it had it reimagined sort of the opening, and she sort of what was the I'm trying to be the Icarus. They used the Icarus myth as a basis of it, and they had a sort of falling from the heavens back down to earth, and she was on wires kind of, and this must have had a fan blowing underneath it, because she had this chiffon on, and it was just like she was falling from the heavens back to join her Descamisados, and it was was interesting, and it certainly I think there's you know, the talent is out there for, you know, for people to reimagine it and stage it. But you know, I think sometimes when it works really well, and it'll always be, you know, I think there'll always be comparisons between a new version,
Always, of course.
staging, because, you know, it just is so iconic, that black box. And like you said, the minimalist staging was just, you know, it just, I mean, Jackie said before, and I always quote you, Jackie, you know, there's just not an ounce of fat. There wasn't an ounce of fat on that show. It was just a perfect piece of musical theatre. You know, you can't, how can you top that? How can anybody top it? It was just genius, absolute genius.
Well, then I was going to say, I forgot in the vast recesses of my memory, I forgot there was also that tour in was it 93 that you did, Val?
92.
We did it together.
On it with me as well. Trying to think of who the producer was on that.
I was trying to think of that too.
Indianapolis. Who was it? Who ran the Indianapolis theater? John Young? No.
That's it. John Young. But yeah, that was Larry had directed that production.
Right.
It was right after my kids were born, and I brought them with me on the road. I had my twins. They were on pink contracts.
They were guppies.
Aw.
I had a memory that I want to throw it out there about the music. In the original production, I think we had a moment where we were down in the pit and sang with the mistress, whatever. But I remember there being a controversy about the synthesizer against the local 802 musicians union. That they were pissed off that they were but the synthesizer was like so right for that show, you know. But there was a controversy about using it.
I have one story about music that you'll all appreciate. I had done a regional production of it years later, and the producer of this wanted to use what they call a virtual orchestra.
Oh.
This was like such a new thing where they would only put like 3 musicians in the pit, and whoever was on the keyboard, he played a certain thing, and it would be like this huge sound of an orchestra, but there were only 3 musicians in the pit.
Wow.
I had not known that was going to be the case, and I remember I had accepted the role, and it was supposed to do 3 cities. It was a 3-city tour, and the first day I got to the orchestra rehearsal, and I looked down in the pit, and don't cry for me. I looked down and I see 3 people, and I went back and I said to the producer, "What the hell is going on? There are like no musicians." You know, well, he said that this is the new concept. They're doing it on Broadway. And I said, "Oh, no, this can't happen. This just can't happen." And of course there was some kind of a musicians union strike about it and everything. And I was furious. And I remember the first city that we were playing, the musicians were all outside handing out flyers. And I came to get ready. You know, I always come like an hour and a half before to warm up and stuff. And I stood out there and I took the flyers and I was like handing out the flyers to people, because I thought it was just the worst thing to happen to musical theater, to lose an orchestra. One of the things you go to the musical theater to see, you know, is live theater is about watching it happen, you know, not just. Anyway, cut to the chase. The next city, the producer filled up the orchestra pit, and he said, "You're absolutely right." He said, "I'm sorry," and that was that. But I just thought that was like the death of musical theater when that happened. And I don't know where it's at now. You know, obviously Broadway's reopening now, and I'd love to be able to go to a show and see if there are actually members down there. But that was
the only time I had not issue, I guess it was an issue, was when we did Cats. I did Cats for the first national. I did Gus Girl Tiger for 2 years. And the orchestra was in another room, wasn't even in the theater, you know? And you as a performer, you want that give and take. I mean, from a video monitor on a light rail, come on, you know, he's not getting the essence of anything. And they've tried so many things, but the only thing, and you're absolutely right, Valerie, is the reality of the live performances being cohesive, you know.
It does make a big difference. It does.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what you do, not always go up to the orchestra at intermission and look down there and just be like,
Yeah.
my, that was just the joy of being at live theater.
Well, and I'm sure you guys do the same thing as me. You stick around as everybody else is leaving the theater to hear the orchestra playing the bows and applaud, because it's usually pretty thrilling anyway. And I'm trying to remember what an equity or Broadway orchestra is down to now. The minimum number, it's getting really low. I think it's like 8 or
no.
10. It's very low. Yeah.
I think we're worse over here in the UK. I mean, the reliance on more on synthesizers and pre-programmed sort of click tracks on especially on touring shows. It's just commonplace now. But there are very few shows over here now that you will have a full orchestra. Phantom being the one that that everybody knew still had that full orchestra, and obviously with what's happened in the past year or so, that's now been reduced. So it's
14 people from 30.
Yeah,
but
it's so sad.
I wanted to pop in and just give Andy a chance to say anything he'd like, because I understand he's got to leave a little bit early. So if you've got some great audition tea or gossip tea, anything like that you'd like to spill, now's the time.
Oh my God. Well, just trying to think. I mean, there was. I'll tell you one story and Patty and I are since become great friends, and but at the time, I was this little squeaker kid, 22 years old, and I was stage left during the show, and I was I was responsible for the slides. So I was the one that was clicking, the cues for the slides, for everything that went on the screen. And one night after one of her numbers in the second act, and I think it was Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, actually, she came off the stage in an absolute fury and just literally got in my face and said, I have told you 10 times to tell that spot operator to stop talking during my number. And I was like, whoa. I said, first of all, Patty, you never told me that. Because if you had told me that, I would have taken care of it. And second of all, don't yell at me. Get out of my face. And we went through this thing, and it lasted the entire second act. She would go on and do high flying adored. Then she'd come off in the wings getting changed, and she'd be yelling at me. And I'd say, you need to speak to George Martin, who was the production stage manager. She goes, oh, I need to speak to George Martin. I mean, it was like this. We were having this like teenage high school argument. I was like this spoiled Jewish kid who'd never been yelled at. And she was like this, Broadway diva who expected a certain level of respect. And this went on and on throughout the entire second act. And when the show was over, I went over to George Martin and I said, just be ready for a storm. I said, Patty and I had some words during the second act. So I left and I came in the next night, an hour before the show or a half hour, whatever. No, I was there an hour. And George pulled me over. He said, I need you to go into Patty's dressing room. And I said, I'm not going to apologize. I said, I'm not going to. He said, no, I don't need you to apologize. I just need you to go in there and talk to her. So I knocked on the door and, I heard come in, and I walked there. And I mean, you just talk about bizarre reality. She's there with the skull cap on. So I walk in and there's Patty LuPone, just skull cap, sitting and, putting her makeup on. And she says to me, she says, Andy, I just want you to know one thing. That was not Patty LuPone yelling at you last night. That was Ava Perone.
Oh, wow.
She was absolutely serious, and I kind of went,
okay.
See you later. I just kind of backed out of the room, and that was it. And I actually found out later she had called Hal that day to have me fired. And he said, it's not going to happen.
Wow.
That's not going to happen. So, and then now, I mean, I've got pictures with her and Mandy and my son, in his room from all the, she's so sweet. And every time we see each other, it's just lovely. But that was just this one incident where I'm sure she was under a lot of pressure and she was nervous, and because this happened in San Francisco, and so we weren't even open on Broadway yet.
Wow.
But that's my Patty story that I will leave you with. But there was a lot of stuff going on. As we said earlier, there wasn't the love affair between Patty and Terry as there was between you, Valerie, and Lonnie. It was a different time, different.
Well, it factionalized the company a lot, and I kept away from it because I just couldn't take it, and it was so silly. Just so silly. And when Patty was doing her book, she called me and asked me about that, and I said, "Tell you the truth," I said, "You knew which camp I was in." I said, "It was yours." I said, "But I had no specifics about what was going on, except there was just such walking on eggs and silliness, which, thank God, between you and Lonnie, we never had that, Valerie, and I mean, I learned, as you, Andy, I'm sure, that somebody like Angela Lansbury knows how to make a company happy, and it comes from the top, it comes from Hal, it comes from her, it came from all of that, and you girls did that, and it wasn't there.
I'll tell you something. Yeah, Sal, I'll tell you something. I was going up to, was it Newbury where all the sets were built? What?
Newburgh
or something. And I'm literally driving up there with her. I had to drive her up there to get her the plaster cast made of her body for the coffin.
Right.
And this was before this incident. And so she was telling me about her experience with John Houseman and and Juilliard and all that. And she said, and this was Mandy and Kevin Kline and her and all this group of actors. Yeah, she said, we were taught that no one was going to help us and that we had to stick up for ourselves at all costs, and no one was going to have our back except ourselves. So that's the kind of, that's what was drummed into her head as a young actress, and she certainly brought that into the production.
Well,
I do have to run, guys.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for being here. It was great.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Well, it was my pleasure, and it was so nice to spend time with you, Sal, and I'm going to get to Palm Springs.
Oh, good.
Sometime, and I'll see you guys. And Valerie, I haven't seen you in ages. And Cliff, give my love to him. And Tony, we need to, I hate to sound so Hollywood, but we need to get lunch.
Oh yeah, lunch is you're on.
Yeah, now that we're sort of slightly less pandemic, I've had 3 shots now, so you can't touch me.
Yeah, I'm looking for my third.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, Andy.
Bye, Andy.
Take
and
care.
I know that Tony has to go as well, so we'll let you get any parting shots before you head out, Mr. Crivello.
I have a daughter who was texting me and saying, "What about lunch?" So
reality.
yeah, reality slaps you right in the face. You know what I will say with this is that I want to talk a little bit to two things. One was the other, like unsung, and Andy was alluding to some of it already. Unsung heroes were the stage managers that behind this show. I mean, we had, as you say, George and John Grigas was such a character in New York, and Tom Guerra, Chris Lawton in Chicago. They really helped to keep the the ship and the train on the track and moving forward and taking care of everybody too. I mean, it was terrific. And
show to call. It was a big show to have to call.
Oh, huge. And at the time, again, groundbreaking and difficult as well. And we had, each one of the companies also had, and it happens when you're doing longer runs and big runs with a lot of people involved. Sometimes there's tragedies that occur, and for them to also just keep the companies together in the midst of some of those tragedies too, was just, it was above and beyond the call of duty. And I have to tip my hat to all of them. The other thing I would say is that, we were talking before, I can't remember if it was John, one of the Johns said about the chandelier, was it in Germany, being named after Hal?
I think it was in Tel Aviv.
What was that again?
Oh, I think it was in Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv. And I have to, I'll say this. I mean, and I know that's Sal and Val. I mean, all of us, and will I think probably echo the same sentiment. Sal and I were at the Hal's Memorial, and I tell you that within the masses, and even for those who weren't there, who couldn't get there, whatever, the people I said before, the impact of Hal Prince on the theater community, and we all know, I mean, the icon that he was, and how he was involved in so many productions. But it really is time that it's got to either a street or the Majestic should be named after Hal Prince. It's really time, and it is, if anybody is deserving, it is Hal Prince. And I know a lot of people feel the same way about that. It really is his impact on for all of us. I mean, he gave us lives. He gave us a livelihood. He, and as Val was saying and Sal was saying, I mean, he would go that extra mile. He was such a gentleman. And as Andy was saying, the pettiness didn't come into the office. He gave, and I'm talking, it's not only actors, just designers and things as well. I mean, I've heard stories from different people saying the exact same thing about him. And it really, God willing, as a beacon for future generations, I think that something has to be done in that regard.
I agree.
So I will end. I will end with that one. And I just, all of you, and Sal and Val. I mean, how it's always a pleasure, even at a distance, to be in your company, and everybody here. What a pleasant afternoon this has been, and it's so wonderful too to hear all of these stories that are either jogging the memory or new tales and stuff about behind the scenes. It's yes, EVITA, but even like the stuff that Sal and Andy were sharing about Sweeney Todd and about on the 20th century and just all of it, it is there. It's all binding fabric to what is such a large, as they say, there's only 13 people in all of theater, and that old adage, it's just such a, it's the thing that binds all of us as a family. It's really wonderful. I mean, I'm so pleased just to be a part of it as well. So,
we all are.
Yeah. Thank you for all of you for agreeing to do it. I mean, this is
back at you.
This is something that was just done on a whim originally. From it was a what if kind of idea, and then it's sort of grown, and I realized, I mean, things are slightly different over there, especially on Broadway, than over here, that we just don't seem to. I realized we didn't have a record of people's of experiences of and working on these shows, and I thought, somebody's got to do it, and I thought, why shouldn't we? And I thought it needs to be there for future generations, that to hear your experiences of working on these shows. It's there forever now, and it's just so wonderful that you agreed to be a part of it. And I can't thank you all enough. Everybody who has ever taken part in one of these, it's just wonderful. And for me, to you, all of you, thank you very, very much. It's
and
just,
that goes double for me. I can't thank you all enough. We'll give a last call in case there's anybody that's been sitting patiently waiting to ask a question, but I think we've taken more than enough of your time. So speak now or forever hold your peace if you're in the audience. But no, really, thank you all so much. It's been an honor to speak with everybody and to have this little connection with everybody. And we'll send you a ping when this gets edited and thrown up on YouTube in case you want to share it with family, friends, etc. And who knows, maybe we'll do something again in the future. We'll possibly bug you again sometime, unless you write me an email and say, leave me alone, John Rinaldi. But we really do appreciate, you've all been very kind and very generous with your time. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna
just nothing but the best to all of you. Thank you, guys. All righty. I think it's one for the books, y'all.
Bye.
Okay, bye, everybody. Thank you again. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.
bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.